Becoming you beyond deconstruction, because deconstruction isn't the end goal. Living a vibrant, soul-aligned life is. Welcome back to Becoming You Beyond Deconstruction. In today's episode, we go back for the second to the last time to the Becoming series, where I'm interviewing speaker, writer and philosopher Alex Verville. Through sharing his own deconstruction and deconditioning journey, Alex reminds us of the powerful role that the people in our lives play in shaping and moulding our faith, beliefs and life path. Many people who remain stuck in a faith or belief system not truly aligned to their soul often stay so for this very reason. And Alex shares how receiving permission to be seen as he is was the catalyst he needed to courageously pursue an authentic spirituality and life path, regardless of the pull to conform of the collective they. This was another powerful conversation, which I'm really excited to share with you. There is some explicit language, so please do be aware of that. If you'd like to connect with Alex, then you can find him via his podcast or Substack newsletter. They are both called The Whole Man, or you can also find him on Instagram. Links are in today's episode notes. If you love the work, please leave a review on iTunes or Spotify, and don't forget to buy me a coffee. My name is Florence Okosogo, and I will see you on the inside. Okay, so welcome to another episode, and I am really excited to have Alex Verville with us. I have been listening to Alex's podcast, and he shares some amazing ideas, which I think that listeners will just love. So the podcast is called Born Saved, which I think is a really interesting title anyway. I'm sure you're going to talk about it. I'm sure people listening maybe have an idea of what it's about and what's going to unfold in it. But if you can just introduce yourself, Alex, for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, Lawrence, thank you so much for having me and allowing me to just have a conversation with you. But as you said, my name is Alex Verville. I'm 33 this upcoming year. I am married to a lovely person who maybe some of your audience has heard as Jazz Moon on Instagram, who also talks about her experience of awakening and just being the infinite self, or we like to say that we are God, created in the image of God. So we are the little G gods. I've just been on my own, what I guess the world would call their awakening journey over the last 7-8 years, and for me that looks a lot with deconstructing and looking at my own Christian upbringing, and evangelical Americanism, really giving you a more and from the Midwest portion of the geography of America. And as you said, one of those spaces that I wanted to create was a podcast called Born Saved, which is kind of what I'm just working on now.
Okay, so you've touched upon a lot there already. So you've touched upon this American evangelical and how you were raised in the Midwest. And obviously I'm not American, and the whole topography of the States is something that I'm not very familiar with. But some of the guests that I have been speaking to are American, and the deconstruction movement is very big in America. Just to set the tone, can you tell me a little bit about your own experience of Christianity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up predominantly in what you would call a non-denominational upbringing. So like in American topography of Christianity, you know, there's in the Protestant side, you know, there's many different denominations, you know, stemming from Lutheran to Presbyterian to, Pentecostal, which is like more of like our charismatic speaking in tongues kind of thing, Baptist, and then non-denominational was something that was created out of that basically you were allowed to like play almost secular songs sometimes on stage, like as a way of looking at God, like using it was a way to get away from as much of the legalism and dogma of a specific like sect of Christianity as possible, but it still obviously is built upon the fact that like Jesus came and is regarded as the Son of God who died for your sins, and you were born apart from God, and because of that death, it's what in Christianity is at least used in the theology that I grew up in called atonement. He's taking your sins and now bridging the gap back so that you can have a chance of being with God. And if you don't believe this, then you will ultimately be set apart from God in hell and not in heaven. So so the theology was still the same, you know, the nuance is a little bit different maybe, but overall,
So how do you think that impacted you to the extent that you started down the deconstruction journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, to be honest, it's weird. I from a very early age, I don't know. For me, it was never so much about like the belief of necessarily of like the Jesus narrative that like scared me, or like I was never really scared of hell, or it was really I had a very patriarchal household, you know, so it was like my parents lived by the like Christian and a lot of the world creed that isn't even Christian, right? But that the father is the head of the household and that the father's word is final. You know, so I grew up worshiping actually my dad and fearing my dad. He was actually God more than God was God. And so because God and Jesus was his God, you know, it was like, if you don't believe this or do this, then you're going to have some problems, and there's going to be a lot of strife, and there's going to be a lot of friction between the two of you, you know, and there's 4 of us kids growing up, and each of us had our own kind of battle and struggle with our dad. So that's really where it mostly played into, is that is this constant struggle of like, do I believe what he believes, and am I going to pretend or not pretend? You know, I was a middle child, so I watched my 2 older struggle, you know, and I was like, do I want that same struggle? You know, so that was kind of the main kind of container that was created for me growing up, was more so I worship my dad as God than
okay
God.
So it was more like kind of I need to keep the peace, or it was this idea of, as you said, do I pretend here to keep the peace, or do I kind of show up as myself and really begin to think about what I believe in?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
So obviously at some point in time you must have begun to answer that question in a way that meant that you were going away from what you were doing before.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's weird because, you know, I feel like in any I think for a lot of people, the whole reason, right, deconstruction exists, I feel like, is because of most people, they've experienced some sort of trauma or abuse. Like in the setting and scenario of, you know, of Christian church. And I'll call it, like, a lot of times I use the terminology like man-made Christianity, because a lot of my experience, you know, I experienced a lot of beautiful things, a lot of beautiful people, a lot of beautiful, true acts of what I now, you know, in a more adult brain, you know, more of like a mature emotional person, now realize like we're genuine moments of faith and genuine moments of belief and genuine moments of compassion and genuine moments of love, all based off of, you know what I mean? Like this avatar, son of God character of like Jesus, the man. So there was a lot of like watching actually and sometimes believing, definitely like in the ideology and in the goodness of what is like more so spoken about and not necessarily done in action.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So definitely the whole concept of Jesus and of like what he was all about and what he came to do, definitely like it definitely was, I was connected to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, figuring out like what was real in terms of like the ceremonial aspect of, Christianity and what I believe that definitely was a constant engagement of like, what do I really want to show up as and who do I want to show up as? Because at times, when you're a kid, especially I think a young man, because men are shown our brains develop slower, like in our emotional IQ, in our up until 25, it's we don't have the tools a lot of times emotionally to evenly express what we're going through, so for me, it really was it. Like in retrospect, it was survival at times. And I would just totally, show up and pretend, to be something that I actually didn't believe in or feel wholeheartedly, connected to.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I hear what you're saying. That kind of that push and that pull. So you're having these moments that feel true to you, and I'm hearing that you're saying that there are aspects of the gospel that you connected with.
Yeah.
And, I understand, because there are aspects that I connect with as well. I still kind of quote scriptures, not quote, but scripture comes to mind. I'm like, oh yeah, I can see it in this light now, out of the kind of the context of religion, it takes on a brand new sense.
Yeah.
But when you're in those confines, it can become like really scary, as you said,
100%.
survival, to kind of even begin to look at things in a new way and ask those questions about who am I and who do I want to be in this setting. So I'm really curious, what enabled you? I know you kind of said, okay, so probably you were 25 and upwards and you were still kind of maturing in yourself, but was there something that made you kind of like go, actually, this is the time, or this is the moment, or now I'm ready, or
the reckoning moment, the real moment for me. That's a great question. And I want to just, before we started recording, I wanted to just go back a moment. I love something that you said, and anyone who's listening to this, a lot of times, wherever you're at in your journey, and it could be the rest of your life, you have, whenever you face, right, or you go into your trauma or abuse, whatever it is for all of us, like there's going to be normally a lot of anger and rage that comes up, so I just wanted to say, if anyone who's listening to this, if you feel that, like, don't feel ashamed or don't feel embarrassed or don't feel bothered that you're feeling that, because that's very natural. And that was something that I've had to go through a lot, about just and it's really just disappointment, like that us as humans would treat one another in a way that is, to me, contradictory to everything that I felt like we were learning. About this person, at least that's supposed to be the savior, but yeah, getting back to your question, my reckoning honestly happened meeting Jazz. So I met my wife at 24. And I'm a firm believer that sometimes remembering the God in yourself, you have to see the God in someone else sometimes. And I think that's why human relationships are so unbelievably quintessential to our spiritual journey and to our ability to see ourselves clearly. I just think we're all mirrors for one another, we right now, right, like we're looking at each other on Zoom and just like the feelings, the emotions, like I'm giving you a mirror to yourself, and you are vice versa giving me a mirror back to, maybe what am I saying and how is that like energetically, you know what I mean, feeling for you.
Definitely.
So yeah, meeting Jazz 100%. It was like, whoa, this person that I've never seen, never even knew existed, now is looking at me, and she sees me for all of me, not for the compartmentalized versions that I've created of myself.
Yeah.
And that's who she wants. In terms of a genuine interaction with, partnership, relationship. And it forced me to be honest.
So that's really interesting. I mean, you're the first person I think that's ever kind of said, so the vessel of change for you was another person, and being in relationship with another person in that way. I mean, of course, I think it's always about being in relationship with somebody, but it tends to be the negative aspect. This person kind of treated me in this way, and as a result of that, it opened my eyes to something else. But what you're saying is that Jazz held up a mirror to you, and you could see that she was seeing you, and that obviously stirred something inside of you
deeply. Like it was so pure. It was as if she was, and we both have children, so the example was be poignant for, I think, both of us, but she was looking at me with those eyes of a child. Where, speaking of you quoting scripture, right? Like there's this moment where Jesus is overhearing his disciples doing this whole thing of like, who's the best or who's the greatest among them, and he comes up to them and says, unless you become like a child, you'll never enter the kingdom, and he's not talking about being childish. He's talking about being childlike, having childlike wonder and imagination, and then if you look at the other things, right, when he says like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which were the religious teachers of the day, are asking him to try to trip him up, where is the kingdom? And he says, it's inside of you. You are the kingdom, right? So then you go back and you say, unless you become like a child, you'll never enter the kingdom. You'll never enter into yourself unless you return to your childlike state, is the way that I now re-looking at it.
That's really interesting. Because I was just going to ask you, so what did that childlikeness mean to you when you had that encounter, and you were being looked at as if by a child? What did that mean to you? What was going on inside of you? Why did it hit you so much?
I think it was the first time and so long, I couldn't even remember another time that it had happened where I was an adult and someone was looking at me, and I had the freedom to truthfully, I felt the freedom to choose, wow, I can be me. Wow.
That's a gift. That's a gift.
It is, continues to be.
And thinking about that, it's no wonder then that it became an invitation to return to yourself, to awaken and return to yourself. Wow. So what did the journey look like?
It was pretty, for us, it was pretty radical, I will say. So we met, and then within a month, we moved in together, and within 8 months, we got married. Within 8 months, we were married. And then after that, a month after we got married, we literally both quit corporate jobs, sold all of our things, and then moved to Thailand to teach English as a second language. So we for us, it was like creating this container of like true, like am I allowed to swear on this podcast or no?
Feel free. Go ahead.
It was like, get the fuck away, as far away from anything that both of you know, from your childhoods, from your whatever, and now in retrospect, I'm really into a country that does not even culturally worship the same religion that you do, because Thailand is a Buddhist country, to truthfully give yourself the space and time to really look at every aspect of your life and how you want it to be lived and what you want it to stand for, possible. So it was pretty radical for us. So
that's the word that came to mind. That is absolutely radical. I don't know many people that would just like sell off everything they own and go to another country where they don't know anything about the custom or anyone, and just give themselves space to rediscover themselves, basically, which is what you were doing. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
So I've heard you talk about Jesus the man often as a quote. I'm interested, what do you mean by this?
Okay, so for me, part of my deconstruction process was like really finding the difference between Christ consciousness, which I think is inside of every single human being on this planet, and like then Jesus the man, who like lived, did die, didn't die, rose again, didn't rose again. It doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? But like, I think for me, I think that the church in its theology, makes a distinction between like Christ, like the cosmic Christ, and Christ the man. I think in its theology, but I think in its outward expression of what that looks like, I think the Christian church worships a man that lived and died. We worship. I mean, you walk into a church and you see crosses. You don't see like we worship the morbidity, to me, of like the death and the sacrifice or something. Honestly, as a reminder, to me, it was like as a reminder that like basically don't stand out, don't ask questions, because when you do, this is what will happen to you. But you're also not God, and you won't rise again. You'll just be dead. So just take everything that we say and take everything that we do, and don't question it, And again, that's to me, the man interpretation of like what, and this is where it's like, I always tell Jazz, like, honestly, for me, it doesn't even matter if Jesus was there or wasn't there, but the example, of it will, and who like the teaching was like, will live on forever. It's the same thing with Buddha. To me, it's the same thing with Krishna. And that's the distinction. So when you ask me like Jesus the man, that's the distinction for me. And it's weird because then the weirdest thing about my deconstruction journey is it's like the thing that was my shackles or was my prison, I like needed that to also be my out. Like, if that makes sense. It also needed to be the thing that was my liberation. So for me, I actually went back and reread the Bible like 3 times while I was in Thailand, like from front to back, because I needed to look at it with the new eyes that I had. You know what I mean? And interpret it for myself and say, okay, like I said, like I was just sharing about, what is the kingdom? Oh, fuck, I had never heard it like that before. Really understanding like, these different things, like, okay, so that's what it meant, to me. Again, I'm not going to claim to, be like a authority on theology, but I don't really care, because to me, then it made sense why you would see, like, for instance, like during the Vietnam War, South Vietnamese monks would light themselves on fire, right? Like as an example to the world that like this war is not something that's supposed to be happening. And they did it right peacefully. They weren't like screaming in agony. They weren't, you know what I mean? Like, why did I do this? Why did I light myself on fire? They died because they had peace, right? And to me, it started to make sense. Like, okay, we are peaceful about the things that we are so sure of. It doesn't matter. And that's why it's very interesting to me now, right? In retrospect, when people get so defensive and so hostile about having a simple disagreement of belief, or a simple disagreement of like, what is it all about? Like, if someone disagrees with you, like, okay, that's okay. Like, why is that to like, we're about to throw blows physically? Like, to me, as I've gone along, it didn't make sense. So that's where, like, again, going back to your original question, sorry, I just went off the rails a little bit.
No, it's fine.
But Yeah, and that's where, like, even when Jesus would make the distinction, like, he would call himself, like, his own self titles were like Son of Man and Son of God. And to me, that's what he was talking about. Like, and to me, we're all God. You know what I mean? As created in the image of God. You know what I mean? And all of us agree, right? Our thoughts and what we think about create our reality. Like, we are the masters of our reality. You know what I mean? For anyone who has kind of gone into, like, I guess it would be called New Age spirituality, that's kind of like a common held belief.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so, yeah, those are the two, you know, the two names that he gave himself. And so, yeah, for me, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. He was in two breaths, identifying with his two aspects, which is, you know, and if you're familiar with my wife's podcast, it's called Humanly Divine. And that's why her name was Humanly Divine, which is where humans were divine.
So what I'm hearing is that this idea of Son of Man, Son of God, gave you permission, in a sense, to start separating the two aspects. So Jesus the man, and the idea of Christ consciousness, which is something that is universal, that exists within all of us.
All of us. Yeah.
Exactly. So how does this relate back to your podcast and the title Born Saved? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's exactly, that's you got it. Literally, that's what it is. It's that we're not born in sin nature. We're not born apart. We are already saved. Like, there's no need to pray a prayer or acknowledge anything. You already are. You know, even if you don't know it or express it, you already are, you know?
So this is going to be a controversial question.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah. Give it to me. Yeah.
So what's the point in your mind? So what's the point of Christianity, or what's the point of believing? I know that so many people who are deconstructing struggle with this question. If Jesus isn't about the atonement and the sacrifice, why was he there? What is the point of believing, you know? And I think what I can see is when this question doesn't get answered in a way that satisfies, the next thing is, well, you know, everything that I believed was wrong. And I'm going to go over here to kind of like, God doesn't exist, and, you know. So it becomes like it's either all of this or none of it at all. Can you speak into that? As I said, it's kind of like controversial.
No, it's not at all. It's not at all. I don't think that's the thing. I think we think it's controversial because of, and that's again where we're at in society, where I feel like everything is a tinderbox, but it's really like, this is what's missing. It's just like just a genuinely interesting and nice discord with one another. But for me, and this is the beauty of this question, because to me, the point of, you asked, like, what's the point of believing? It's not as a collective, it's not as a family, it's as you individually, right? That should be an individual question. It should not be, you know what I mean, we're justifying it from a comparison about what someone else is believing or why they believe it. It's why you believe something, right? So for me, why I believe is because, to me, Jesus, the man, cosmic Christ, or whatever you want to call it, like gave us an example that I want to live as. And knowing that it's not the Son of God and the only Son of God, but me also as a son of God. You know what I mean? Like, I can do that too. Like this is why then I look at, rereading scriptures that I didn't even know existed, right? Like, I heard growing up in church, like, the thing that we want to hear from whoever when we arrive to heaven is, well done, good and faithful servant, right? This idea of like, you're lower than. But Jesus actually said to his disciples, this is a real verse, okay? He said, how can I call you servant? I no longer call you servant, but I call you friend, because you know the master's business. Like, you know the master's business just as I do. So how can I call you servant? I now call you friend, right? The same, and then you go then you go to other verses right before he's like ascending into heaven or whatever, like his humanly body. And he's saying to his disciples, well, like, if you think what I did on earth was great, like you will do far greater things than I ever did. So then it's like, holy wow, this is what it's all about, is like not truly idolizing like this man, but using the reflection of his tapping into his godness as man and tapping into his cosmic Christness, that like I can do that in the utopian societies that we talk about, and living right in this place.
Yeah.
He only taught one prayer: thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So he wasn't saying that heaven is this far away place. He's saying that it's now, it's here. You know what I mean? And it's possible.
Yeah.
Like, to me, then me, that being my belief, like there is nothing else to do to me. Like then it becomes I'm not like doing the things that I'm doing to like appease God or like be in good standing or, you know, like try to have people look at me as pious, or I'm just doing it because that is what I believe our humanity is: love and compassion and unselfishness and deep respect. You know what I mean? And deep, like a deep look at this life is truly bliss. You know what I mean? And that we could do it together.
That's a lovely way of putting it. That's really lovely. Very powerful. I love it.
That's my why.
No, that's fair enough, and I do resonate with that, and I know that other people have similar perspectives about it. Just this idea of Jesus is a good role model, and whether you believe that he is literally you know, the incarnate Son of God, or whether you believe that he was a good man, it doesn't take away from the fact that there are so many examples of how to be a good human being in the Bible. And you're right, I think that we can get really stuck in what you call the man-made theology aspects, the Christianity, the dogmas, the traditions, the doctrines, and forget that fundamentally this Jesus, he died early because he was so damn rebellious. You know what I mean? He totally went against everything in that time. So that is something to remember. And I feel like even though that is all there in the Bible, that Christianity, Western Christianity, really teaches us to be afraid of making noise.
Yeah, of course, because that is what the whole man-made like aspect of Christianity hinders on, right? So the tribe has to teach. Like, you can't interpret this for yourself. You need to interpret it as a collective, because if you don't, right, we don't survive. Again, like the continuation of this tribe as we'd known it and how we have thrived, you know, for the last 1700 years, because it was about 300 AD, maybe, I think, that Constantine decided to make Christianity, you know what I mean, like the religion of Rome, you know what I mean? And then all of its regions that it was in charge of. You know, and I think that we forget that even though, you know, these ideas of inerrancy, right? Like the Bible being like God whispered to these men, and, you know, like could be or couldn't be true, you know, but then like the order of it is supposed to be inerrant, right? And then the translations from the original Greek and Hebrew, like in Latin, like where nothing was lost, you know, like it's, the whole thing is like, look at humans and look at our level of proficiency of error, you know, in our history. Like, and it's like, I don't know. I just think it's comical to like, I just go back and I do. I just laugh, like not even like a condescending laugh anymore, you know, because I used to be condescending where I truthfully did just think like these people are idiots, but they're not. They're just believing what their scope of experience is and their scope of environment is, right? Like, it's not even like, there's not even a bad guy. Like we are at a point, like I said, where everything is such a tinderbox where it like doesn't, like speaking the truth doesn't have to make someone wrong. Like if that makes sense. Like I actually was just watching a movie with my kids the other day. It's called Sea Creature. And the whole thing is basically based off of like this ideology that there's these sea hunters who have been taught that the monsters of the sea are out to get them and they're out to destroy humanity. And then there's this little beautiful black girl who like whose parents actually were hunters themselves and they were killed at sea. And then it's her basically being obsessed with this idea that she wants to be a hunter and wants to also do what her parents did. But then they come upon a sea monster, of course, but the sea monster doesn't kill her. And she realizes, oh my gosh, this whole, like, actually, maybe we brought the war to them. You know what I mean? And there was never anything that they thought, you know, that actually was endangering us. Like the whole thing was a farce. And she says this, I think is the most poignant message of like what we all could believe today is that you can still be a hero and get it wrong. She says to like the other hunters to get them to like, to not think like, oh my God, what have we been doing? You know, to like just make them feel all the shame and the guilt and everything that comes with maybe like having done like the wrong thing. And I have air quotes, right? Like, cause you can still be a hero and have got it wrong, right? Like you can still be someone who grew up in the church and did missions work and like did this whole like thing of like preaching and your heart was truthfully there in that place when you were there. But now you're in a different evolved state and version of yourself. And like, you know what I mean? You are the sum of your parts. You're not broken off. You know what I mean? And we don't, like, you get what I'm kind of saying?
Yeah.
Like,
So I feel like you're touching on forgiveness, actually.
Yes.
Self-forgiveness.
Yes.
So we can definitely be in that place where, you know, we've bought into the ideology. And I don't know about you, but definitely for me, I grew up in the church, but not in the church. I came from a Catholic background. My mum was really strong about us going to mass every Sunday, and I did the whole altar girl thing, and you know, was really, really involved from that perspective. But it wasn't until I set off by myself to university, which you guys call college. I never know why you call it college, but you do. And I was exposed to Pentecostalism, the evangelicalism, all the other types of Christianity, which my mom swore up and down, you know, being diehard Roman Catholic. No, we are the real church. But because I've always been a truth seeker and spiritually curious and spiritually hungry, I wanted to see whether I could find something in those spaces that I wasn't getting from the Roman Catholic Church. And so I entered in with my whole self into those spaces. Again, the ministry, worship team, all the things, you know, even sometimes speaking and teaching. But underneath all of that, there was something inside of me that didn't sit easy. That still kind of knew something isn't fully okay here. And when I did finally come out of it, I don't think I experienced guilt or shame, but I can definitely understand why other people do when they spend so long buying into all of that stuff, that when they come out the other side, they were like, I can't believe that I bought into all of it.
The brainwashing.
You know.
For sure.
But I love the way that you said it. In that space, in that time, you were fully as you could be into it. You believed to the capacity that you could believe. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been there. Something would have made you decide to leave. When you were at capacity to leave, you did leave. Something clicked and switched and you decided to go. So there's that bit of, so how can I forgive myself for being in this space
Which I now think is like a cult, or I now think is like
exactly
creating, you know, all the issues in the world, you know, of like colonization and of slavery, like it being the reason, you know what I mean, for these things. Like,
and you were a part of it.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
I was basically paying for this stuff to happen.
And that's the thing. And you're right. Like, so the first is individual forgiveness, but then, like I said, the rage of like, you still want like in your attempt, right, for individual forgiveness for anything, you know, and we could just use this as the micro to like that macro concept, right? Like when we're forgiving ourselves for anything, like we a lot of times want to compare, right, like what we did to like what the collective did, or like what basically the worst version of that thing is. And that's really to get ourselves off the hook, you know, for taking responsibility for the things fully that we just have to take responsibility for in our own life. So even then, like the rage that you normally will feel in this, like I said, of like, oh, but this church or this time period, they were way fucking worse than anything I did. Well, you still are part of that, right? But that, again, like I said, doesn't make you bad. Doesn't make you, like I said, it doesn't, because most of us, when we're asked the question, right, like if you like who you are to an extent, even to an extent, right, because all of us are on the journey of like of self-love and truthfully like loving who we are. But if you like yourself enough, right, normally when you ask the question to someone who likes themselves, even 20%, 30%, like, would you change anything in your life? You know, normally they say no, because they know it's a butterfly effect, right? If I change one thing, that might mean that I might not have something else that I absolutely do love, either about myself, about my partnership, about my kids, you know what I mean, about my family. Like there normally is that answer. And so that's why I say we are the sum of our parts, because everything is in co-creation with one another to get you to where and who you are in this present breath. You know, and so that's the gift and the curse, you know, is it's and so it's not even just like a rosy thing, like or even like a philosophy where I'm saying like, oh, I don't have any regrets, basically as a justification to not look at my past. But it's it really is it's an embodiment, like, whoa, at least in this lifetime. And I say lifetime because I'm a believer of reincarnation. And again,
we have to talk about that.
That's something that I think was, when the church was founded in the man-made version of Christianity, like reincarnation was, at least in the research that I've done, and there's two schools of thought, obviously, but like was something that was taken out of organized Christianity. It was always something that was a part of the early, you know, like practice and belief of like Christendom, you know, or Christendom, like the initial, you know, belief. So for me, it's like in this lifetime, like I believe that I chose like the things that I have been engaged with and that have happened in my life. I believe that like at my higher God self, like chose, like, this is the perfect recipe and courses, you're right. Like you said, uni, like for me to take, for me to like truthfully identify like as my infinite divine self. And it's up to me in that co-creation to see beyond. And this is where like the metaphor of the veil, right? Like Christ dying, like in immediate, he drew his last breath in the veil, right? It tore. So like a new thing was created out of that death, right? And this is death and rebirth. So even if you're just someone who like doesn't believe in anything, like, but you look at things as metaphor, it's like, just look at the powerful imagery, you know what I mean, that's happening of death and rebirth and things being born constantly, right? Like, and then we look at nature and it's like the seasons, and it's like all of it is just trying to remind us of, to me, our divinity, you know what I mean? It's all just connected, and each of those things for each of us, it's like, how does each one of them and your own personal practice hit you, you know what I mean, to identify with that and not like our imbalanced egoic self or our imbalanced, you know what I mean, programming, you know, of like, I need to take what is mine, because if I don't, it means that me and mine will die. Where it's like, no, like scarcity is the greatest like falsity or fallacy like that we've ever created as humanity. Like there's way more, you know what I mean, abundance for all of us in everything, in money, in love, and what, like in all aspects of life. There's more than enough, you know.
I think what is touching me from what you said is this idea of death and resurrection, or death and life, you know, the repeated cycles of that, and how we can see this in nature. And what I saw as you were saying this was a tree. If we just look at a tree, every year it gets another circle, another ring, you know, it's growing and growing. It takes with it all that knowledge, all that experience, all that wisdom is stored inside of it. So if we think, actually, if this happens in nature anyway, this kind of like death and rebirth, this continual cycle of life, then maybe for me, I'm thinking it's possible then that this can also happen at a human level. Something that I think about is this idea of personal evolution. I know, you know, people talk about human evolution as a collective, but I also think about personal evolution. So how we are growing, how we evolving, how we are becoming. And, you know, when I first decided to put this together, that was going to be the original title, Becoming, because the idea is that we are evolving, we are becoming who we already are in this continual evolution upwards into our highest self. So it's really interesting that you say that reincarnation was an aspect that has been taken out, and obviously this is something that we can talk about, and probably we can, you know, talk about for ages and ages. We can never fully really know, but it begs the idea of, if this is something that is a part of our life cycle, is a part of what happens to us, then it changes so much about how we are forced to believe in just kind of like, we die, and if we're good enough, then we go to heaven or we go to hell. Because a lot of, I think, and the other struggle that people face when they're deconstructing or question is, what if I'm wrong? That is the other question. What if I'm wrong? You know, and even when you're evangelizing, I've been in enough, you know, I've been out enough times evangelizing to know that that's a killer question that you ask, that you ask, and you say to somebody, well, what if you're wrong? If I'm wrong, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
But if you're wrong, where are you going to end up?
Exactly. Yeah, of course. And that's that's so interesting, you know, and it's funny that you share like that aspect of like Christianity or organized Christianity, like the evangelizing aspect, because I just want to share like a funny anecdotal story about myself. I used to pray and pray and pray like that God, like, I mean, from 5 to probably 15, that like God would like bring people into my life that I could like basically help become Christian. Like thousands of times, I swear to you, like on my knees, because that was what at the end of the day my dad cared most about. Like, so going back to like me worshiping like my dad, you know what I mean, as God, like, and not once have I ever prayed that prayer with anyone, but I prayed it earnestly and faithfully and truthfully. And so I was also just another moment for me in my own personal journey where I was like, whoa, I never, even in all of my deepest desires, I've never even had a chance to do that with anyone, you know, like as like just a laughable, like, like, maybe this is never was supposed to how it was supposed to be, you know? But to answer your question, like, or kind of just to also comment on it, right? It's like, normally the organized Christian, you know, answer is like, well, even if it isn't true, like, at least you'd be living a life that was like, you know, in alignment with compassion and with love and with acceptance of others and a non-judgment, you know, like would be like, if you don't believe, you know what I mean, that like there is more than this in any capacity, right? So like that's even like something that I always, like, even when I was still young, thought like, okay, if this is somebody that I gravitate towards, like in terms of their message and how I kind of like also want to live my life, then who cares if it doesn't, if it's not real, you know what I mean? Like, it's still a pretty dope ass philosophy, you know what I mean, to live by. And like that's where, right, like those same people who don't believe in God, like it could be Nietzsche or, you know what I mean, like Descartes, or like any of these beautiful Aristotle like philosophers, or you know what I mean, like ideologies that they are living by, you know what I mean. But those are also, you know, like just philosophies. You are the one who's doing it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's
yeah.
like, at the end of the day, right? And that's why, like, to me, when Jesus said, like, my true disciple will pick up their cross and carry it, like, to me, I interpret that like we all are responsible for our own journeys. You know what I mean? Like, and it's up to each of us to pick up whatever it is at any given lifetime. You know what I mean? And surrender to it. You know, and say, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want, and make the choice, because it ultimately is our choice, I believe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's interesting. And probably a good place to end is a scripture that I think of often is work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And for me, that is not what I have been led to believe that it means, which is basically, you know, be afraid, be very, very afraid, you know. It's this idea that our salvation is something that we do co-create. It's something that is happening right here, right now, all the time. And, you know, we do it with intention and consciousness, and we are a part of it. And we see that we are responsible for so much more than just ourselves. That is the fear and the trembling and the awe, because it's not just our salvation, like my personal salvation. It's the salvation of the person next to me, the people around me, not in the context of you're going to end up in heaven or hell, but in the context of you're here to live life as fully as possible. And my actions will have an impact on somebody else's ability to live that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Each of us are the manifestation for each other.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Alex. I know it's like 1:30 in the morning. Well, it's not 1:30 now. It's gone 2. It's way after 2. I really appreciate your time.
No, I honestly, it's an absolute joy. I could talk about this for hours. It's honestly, I could talk about it for hours. So thank you for having me, and it was truly a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Before we close out for today, I just want to take a moment and tell you about a workshop that I'm running on the 7th of January 2023. It's called the Sacred Soul Alignment Workshop. This workshop utilises writing as a tool to reconnect you to your body and soul's wisdom, and use that as a guide to help you start the new year and chart your way through the year in a way that is aligned to what your soul truly desires. You can find out more about this by going to today's episode notes and following the link. My name is Florence Okwasogo, and I'll see you on the next episode of Becoming You Beyond Deconstruction. you.